I'm going to assume you don't have many Republicans on your show. So
Not often, but we're not averse to that. It's just that they don't want to come on. It's crazy because we're not bad guys.
Not at all.
I've had Bill Fox on. Bill Fox is a good Republican.
I'll give you 5 seconds.
Okay.
Is he the one?
He's at UT.
Yeah, I was thinking Matthew Murray. Never mind. There's one of them that never votes in primaries, so you never know which way.
Well, Bill may not vote in primaries. Yeah, he may not.
All right. 5 seconds and you're on.
Okay.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Good evening and welcome to Democratic TV. We're coming to you this evening from the downtown studio of Community TV Studios. My name is Doug Veum and I'm here with Chris Davis, the Assistant Knox County Election Administrator. This evening, Chris and I will be discussing some of the issues around the voting process, including registration, protocol in the polling place, and provisional ballots. With so much media attention to the voting process and the lingering questions related to alleged voter irregularities, we want to be informative for you on the whole voting process and to help maintain your confidence in our Knox County and Tennessee state election process and how it is administered. But before we get into a discussion on voting, let me inform you of a listening tour now underway by the leadership of the Tennessee Democratic Party, which will come to Knoxville on Tuesday, December 13th. Tuesday, December 13th at 6 p.m. They say it's going to last a couple, 3 hours. It's an open discussion. It's going to be held at the AFL-CIO Central Labor Council, which is located at 1522 Bill Williams Avenue, which is across from the WBIR studios up in North Knoxville. TNDP Chair Mary Mancini will be leading this meeting/discussion, which will be, the purpose of which is to discuss what worked, what didn't work, a lot of that didn't work, and how we move forward in future elections. This is an opportunity to hear both the assessment of the election results by the state leadership of the Democratic Party, and also provides a means for your input on how the Democratic Party can be more effective in winning elections in the future. So Chris, let's talk first about the registration process, how a resident of Knox County can verify their registration status and what they must do to register if they're not currently registered voters. My first question is, where does a resident of Knox County verify they're registered? And if not, how can they register to vote?
Okay. Well, two places really. Number one, any individual in Knox County who wants to ascertain whether or not he or she is registered to vote can give our office a call, the Knox County Election Commission, at 215-2480, and just inquire, give their name, their birth date.
So name and birth date.
Name and birth date usually are what we use. If for some reason we get a lot of Mike Smiths on a certain birthday, we might ask for Social Security number.
Yeah.
We do keep Social Security record numbers on file. They are not required to vote, but they are required to register to vote.
Okay.
As well as you can also visit our website, knoxcounty.org/election, and there's a box on the front of the website that literally says, "Am I registered to vote?"
I know that one.
If you click on that, I think it'll ask you for your birth date, last name, and county of residence, and then it will pull you up if you are a registered voter. If someone's not a registered voter, a couple of ways. Number one, they can give our office a call and we can mail them a voter registration form, which they can fill out and complete and either hand deliver back to us or mail to us. It needs to be, the original, because we can't have a copy of the signature. We need the original signature. They can also go online, print one off, and mail it or deliver it to us. As well as, on occasion, organizations, including ourselves, have voter registration drives throughout town in which they can register to vote.
So I will say this, that calling the Election Commission office is pretty easy. You've got a pretty good reputation, with me at least, of answering your phone.
We try to. We certainly try to.
So that you're going to talk to somebody just about right away. You may leave a message, but pretty often.
I think our attitude generally is if we take a call before an election, if we can get something taken care of on the front end, we don't have to deal with it on election day.
Good point. Yeah, exactly. So that's it. First of all, then just back up a little bit, Chris. Who is eligible to register in Tennessee? Who can be a voter?
Okay.
Are there any parameters, requirements?
Yes,
like
absolutely. That? Yeah. Number one, someone has to be a United States citizen.
Okay.
Number two, he or she has to be not only a resident of the state of Tennessee, obviously, but a resident of the county where he or she wishes to register to vote. You have to, for instance, if you want to, if you live in Knox County but you work in Anderson County, you have to vote in Knox County where you reside.
Right.
Vice versa, if you live in Anderson but work in Knox, you have to vote in Anderson. So you have to be a resident of the county.
Yeah.
You have to be at least 18 years old by the next election day.
Okay, so a 17-year-old could register if they're going to be 18 before the.
That is correct, and in theory, they can actually early vote. Let's say if somebody, like this most recent election, give you a quick example. If the election day was November 8th, someboody birthday was November 7th, and they turned 18, they can vote early voting. I think it started October 19th.
It did, right.
And they could vote, and it would count.
Oh, okay, now that's it. I hadn't thought about that. Of course, it makes sense.
Yeah, and every once in a while we get one of those, obviously.
Yeah.
So,
well, now that would be good incentive for a young person to vote. It's one of the problems we have, I think, is that not enough young people do vote.
We would totally agree with you. And then obviously the other big thing is if someone has been convicted of a felony in the state of Tennessee and has not had their rights restored.
Right, exactly.
Then they would be disqualified from voting. Yeah. But assuming those 4 things are in place, then anyone can register to vote.
So citizen, resident of the county, resident of the state, and 18 years or older. Okay,
that's correct.
That sounds good.
Yep.
Now, how does a prospective voter then verify that they have the required status? In other words, how do they verify those four requirements?
How do they verify? How do they prove? I guess.
Well, I guess prove.
Yeah, I mean,
verify. Yes, prove would be. You guys are more into the right language. Prove.
Yeah, I mean, essentially for us, we take people at their word when they're signing a voter registration form. There's an affidavit on there that they verify that they're 18 years of age, they're a United States citizen. They've not. There's 4 questions on there: not been convicted of a felony, et cetera, et cetera. And then the only thing, and I think we might dive into that a little bit more, but. The only piece of information they would need to provide either when they register or when they vote is a photo ID issued either by the federal government or state of Tennessee, which I'm sure we'll get into.
To prove that they are, we'll get into that. To prove that who they are is who they are.
That is correct.
Who they're claiming to be is who they are.
That is correct.
All right. Okay, you said where does he go to register? You can call your office. You appear at your office. Now, who else can process or at least hand out or encourage filling out an application?
Yeah, anyone can do a voter registration drive, certainly. And of course, there are various groups throughout town. There's a group called the Legal Women Voters, which I'm sure many of your viewers are familiar with it, that does voter registrations throughout the year. The Election Commission does voter registrations by law at every high school every year.
Yeah, I saw that. In fact, you actually do that.
Every public and private high school every year. There's probably 20 plus in Knox County when you combine public and private. We are required by law also to do them at every naturalization ceremony, and we have at least 4 of those every year over here at the courthouse, usually quarterly, give or take. Really neat ceremonies, by the way, to see someone become. I mean, they really. And I don't want to denigrate anyone, but they appreciate the privilege that they're about to receive.
Well, they've had to work for it.
They've actually had to work for it. It's outstanding. And then, of course, voter registration drives go on throughout the year, and anyone can do them. But what we encourage someone to do is, if they're going to do a voter registration drive, let our staff work with them to make sure that prospective voters are completing the form accurately and properly. Because there's nothing worse for us than getting a call from an angry individual who swears they registered. We go back and look at their form. It was done at a voter registration drive by Group X. And Group X didn't make sure to fill out questions 1 and 2 or 3 and 4.
You pointed out to me a couple of times, or more than a couple of times, there are a couple of questions on there that sometimes get missed.
They are.
I remember what it is. There's one of them that apparently is really
Are you 18 years of age or older?
Okay.
Are you a citizen of the United States? And the big one is, and there's the way the state made these forms, we don't necessarily like that. I'll go on record saying I think a lot of other counties would as well, but there's one that it asks you a question that asks for a yes, and there's one that says, have you convicted of a felony? No. A lot of times people just go down and go, yes.
Okay, right. Yeah.
Then under law, we look at it, it says you've been convicted of a felony. You have to then show us or appeal basically that you've not been convicted. And so it's a problem, but that's why we want people who understand the form doing these.
Right, so, exactly. Well, now, which leads me to another question then. Okay, if any organization, basically the civic-minded organization that feels that they have a responsibility to do these things, if they schedule some kind of a drive like this, could they send a representative to the Election Commission office? Would you then be able to? Would you then instruct them as to how to fill
Absolutely,
it out? Okay.
Absolutely. In fact, we would encourage that. Frankly,
that's what I kind of thought.
If someone's going to do one, come in, and any one member of our staff, we have. I just did the math the other day, Doug. I think between our 9 staff, we have like 130 plus years of election experience. It's amazing. Right, but any one of our staff would be able to walk them through the process of what you're looking for,
and really point out the pitfalls. Really point out the ones that
the things that are going to get most people hung up. Yeah,
exactly.
Absolutely.
Okay. So, well, that's interesting, which means that the registration process, as I'm hearing you describe it, should be relatively accessible to almost anyone who makes any kind of effort at all.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, if you have a phone or computer, or you can walk in, if someone needs assistance, certainly we'll help them and assist them in filling the form out.
But the application for registration is quite different from the voting process. And you can have people trained to help people fill that out.
Yeah. Absolutely.
You don't need, it's not like a special status to go inside the polling booth with someone. You or I could go and instruct someone.
As long as they, if they need help voting, there's a little thing you have to sign, basically affidavit of assistance, I think is what it's called.
That's but for the registration.
Oh, absolutely.
If you and I can go out into a grocery store, for example, and outside register people right there, and we can. There's no requirement for us other than it's good courtesy to you as the election commissioners and
ultimately he's a voter.
To voter, to have them fill out correctly.
Yeah, and I think that's the reason we say that is we're the ones who get the angry calls from people who we have to send a letter to under the law that says they're not registered for this reason.
Right.
And then we have to go back and say, well, you registered with group X on day Y, and that may be a problem. So.
Now, one thing I did read, I thought, and I was startled by this, is that if you once registered, always registered. In other words, registration is essentially permanent. Okay.
Yeah, assuming, of course, someone votes on even a semi-regular basis.
Right.
Yeah,
okay.
absolutely.
Which was the next question. Then. How often must a voter? First of all, I think it's important for people who are listening to know that voter registration lists are public.
They are public. The only thing that comes out of our office that's not public record are Social Security numbers.
Yeah,
and so if someone wants a copy, for instance, of Doug Veum's voting history, which you can get, or Chris Davis's voting history, we'll send you that, and the only thing we redact from that record is a Social Security number.
So that is in there, but you can't get that. But the record itself, and I think that I want to emphasize that because I'm not sure everyone realizes that, but that is a public record.
It is.
And so that looking at it and having access to it is not anything that is subterfuge or secret or whatever.
No, and in fact, we get, I won't say on a semi-regular basis, there are a handful of people in town who request voting records for people all the time. And to be clear, we can't tell how you voted in a particular race, but we can tell that you voted in an election.
Yes.
And if it's a primary, in which primary you voted.
Right. Exactly. I know that's accessible. I must confess, I use that. Yeah. I mean, when you're working with a candidate, you use that.
And you're not the only person.
No, of course not. Oh, I also know this. I say this to the audience that you provide a disc. That has every registered voter on it.
That's correct.
With a register, you have to be somewhat of a bit of a IT guru to work through that.
It's some type of spreadsheet that you'll probably need an IT type person to open it. But I will tell you, the only thing we require for that is free. Is just that
I know
if you just have to sign something basically saying that you're not going to use it for solicitation purposes, basically for marketing or selling things. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. That's what I understand. Okay, so once registered, your permanent registration. What are the things, Chris, that could remove your registration or make your registration somewhat invalid so that you come to the poll thinking you're registered and you're not?
Okay. Well, number one, if the Election Commission receives information that someone has, number one, committed a felony.
Yeah. Okay.
That would obviously.
And there's a process for you to.
There is. The state actually sends us reports every day on those. Yeah. If we have record that someone is deceased, we have to remove them from the voting polls, and that's from the state, as well as in slow times, which for us aren't very often. We'll actually go through the obituaries of local people every day. If we find evidence from the state once again that someone has registered to vote in another county,
I saw that too.
Then they will be removed. And then except for those circumstances, for the most part, the way it works is if someone doesn't vote in at least 2 November federal elections or any election contained in those years, basically in a 4-year period, the Election Commission will, in the spring of every odd numbered year, we will do what we call voter list maintenance, where we will go through and find the people who haven't voted in the last 4 years, at least 2 regular November elections, and we will then place them on what we call inactive status, and we will mail them a confirmation card, just a little postcard, just trying to confirm, do you still live here? Is this still your address? Because the law kind of assumes that if you haven't voted in 4 years, you may have moved, you may be deceased. We don't know. Someone returns that confirmation card to us. Yes, I still live at 123 Smith Street. We place them back active.
Sure.
If someone votes in that next 4-year period, at least 2 November elections following that, then we place them back active. If they sign a petition, for instance, a wine and grocery store petition, then we place them back.
You'll see them.
Then we'll place them back active.
Right, okay.
If after 2 regular November elections of being inactive, they still haven't voted, then they haven't voted in at least 8 years, and they haven't reached out to our office to tell us that they have moved or they haven't moved, then we will have to, under the law, in that 9th year, purge them from the voter rolls.
Okay.
And that happened. We frankly, we heard that a lot during the November election. Just anecdotally, I'll tell you, we had one guy who was raising Cain on us. He hadn't voted since President Reagan.
Oh my goodness,
But good night, he had found somebody he wanted to vote for.
Okay, right.
And another individual, same thing, hadn't voted since President Carter, but found someone he wanted to vote, and they couldn't understand why they weren't registered. It's like, law, if you haven't voted in 32 years,
we're not sure
the
where
law
you are.
assumes you may be dead,
Right,
and
exactly.
so it's...
so what is that, okay, which then leads to a really good question. What happens to that person? Because there's now this is one of the things I really want to talk about is what happens if you get to the polls and that you discover I'm not on the list that I thought I was on.
Well, it's one of those things. Number one, someone in that instance, we can vote someone what's called a provisional ballot.
Right.
I know we'll talk a little bit more about that, but basically a provisional ballot, we use the word provisional ballot, it's a paper ballot. Because by law, if someone has been purged or if we can't provide evidence in our signature books that they are indeed a registered voter, we can't by law let them vote on the machine.
Okay.
And so therefore they have to vote a paper ballot, and then we will, after the election, discern their, are they indeed registered? Maybe something was amiss.
Right. Gotcha.
And so we'll investigate that further. But that's really their only recourse at that point, because you don't have in Tennessee same-day voter registration. You have 30 days before an election to register to vote. And so really that's their only recourse if they find out they have been purged from the voter rolls.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's one of the big classes of provisional ballots. Okay.
Yep.
And then they come to what they need to bring to the polling location is their approved ID card.
Photo identification.
Not their voter registration card, but a photo ID.
Yeah, and you don't need, just to clarify, because we get this question every election, we do not need your voter registration card to vote. It is nice to have with that little barcode, particularly in early voting.
Right.
It makes it a lot easier. And I encourage all of you to early vote. And let me say real quick, I know your time's limited, but I just want to make this plug for early voting, because I think sometimes early voting is seen as a political issue, a Democratic versus Republican issue. I will tell you just straight up, and we're very adamant in our office, from an election administration standpoint, we love early voting.
Yeah,
there's nothing bad about early voting.
That's what I would think too.
It's awesome, and frankly, it just takes people away from election day. But back to the question.
Right.
Refresh me.
Right. I was saying, what happens if they come to the poll?
If they come to the poll,
and they wind up, or I guess how many people come to the poll finding out that they aren't registered, or they thought they were registered, then what do they have to do besides?
They'll have to present a photo ID issued either by the state of Tennessee or the federal government.
That was my question.
With the exception of student IDs from Tennessee College, well, any college and university, let alone state of Tennessee. Universities and institutions of higher learning are not allowed. Out-of-state driver's licenses are not allowed, which they were 4 years ago, but in 2013, I believe the legislature changed that to now it's just Tennessee driver's licenses, along with other various identification only if you work for the United States government, if you work for the Department of Defense, other various federal identifications are allowed.
Are the list of the approved IDs available in the polling location, and where else can they find them?
They will be in the polling location. The Officer of Elections will have those, as well as you can also check out the Secretary of State's website. I believe they're on our website as well.
I think
a link to those anyway.
Yeah,
yes.
Okay, right. So, but it's a good idea. It's a good idea to check. Well, before you go to the poll, it's a good idea to, one, am I registered? Two, what do I need to vote? Because once they're in the polling location, they're going to have to go to a election worker, an officer of the election, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And now at that point, let me touch on a couple of things with photo ID real quick. Number one, a couple of different things. Just anecdotally, what we see a lot of times is we see students from out of state who don't have a Tennessee driver's license or a passport. We see folks who have out-of-state driver's licenses who have lived here a while now, but they never bothered to get a Tennessee driver's license. And then the third one we see a lot of is, I left it in my truck, left it in my other pants, left it on the dresser, who don't walk around with their driver's license. We don't see many instances here of people just not having an adequate photo identification. Well less than 1% of the population. But with that said, if someone comes in and he or she does not have a photo identification suitable for voting that day, then we would direct them to the officer who would vote them a provisional ballot.
Okay, there's the other
And and we call those, we clarify that we classify them in two ways. The ones where someone doesn't have photo ID that day, they're called orange provisional ballots, and basically because it's the envelope we put it in, not the ballot cut stays the same. And then your garden variety. We don't know if you're registered or not voter is a green provisional ballot.
Now the voter has to do something differently depending on which one.
That's correct.
Right. So what is the orange ballot?
If the orange voter comes in, or the voter comes in doesn't have a photo ID, we will give them the option of voting a provisional ballot, and if they choose to do so, then they will fill out that ballot. We will then put the ballot in the ballot box, give them an information sheet telling them they have by the close of business on the second day after the election to come to the Election Commission and present a photo ID. Basically, so if you have a Tuesday election, they have by the close of business, a lot of people in the media said 48 hours, but it's not really true. It's by the close of business on the second day after that Thursday at close of business, 4:30, they have it to submit their photo ID. To then have the absentee ballot, provisional ballot counting board count their ballot.
That, by the way, is a really good reason for voting early, because if you show up at downtown West on the first day of early voting and you don't have your ID, instead of casting a ballot, what you do is go home the next and bring it in the next day.
The next day, that's right. That's absolutely right. And we highly encourage that.
I know you've got this thing called fail-safe, but talk about really fail-safe. That's what that really is, a fail-safe kind of thing. Okay, so those are the two provisional ballots that are I'm not on the registrar's list. I think I should be, and that will be something that you'll investigate and determine once you've got the information as to whether or not they're registered, and count the vote if it's registered, if they should be registered, and not counted if they don't. The other is the ones who show up without a photo ID, and that's a much more, they have a much shorter time to, they have to respond to that. They have to bring you something. That's right, okay.
If they want their vote to be counted, then it has to be in there by the second business day.
Exactly. Now, at what point in the process are all the provisional ballots included in the totals?
Basically what happens is, of course, we do provisional ballots in early voting and election day, and at all points when a provisional ballot is cast, it's filled out, it's put in envelopes, sealed, there's an affidavit signed that all this information is correct to the best of their knowledge and belief, and then put in a locked ballot box that literally in Knox County at least has a red lock and a blue lock with only the Democratic commissioners have the blue and consequently Republicans with the red, and they're opened only in the presence of the Central Provisional Ballot Counting Board, which is a group of Democrats and Republicans that meet after Election Day, sometimes 1 or 2 days after, sometimes 3 days after. By law, under any normal election, all of the provisional ballots have to be counted within the close of business 4 days after the election. Now, we got an extension. We usually will get extensions on presidential elections because they're so the number of ballots is so voluminous. But basically, your Central Provisional Ballot Counting Board is generally going to meet either Thursday or Friday after the election, open up the ballot boxes, look at the provisional ballots and all the information that our staff provides to them regarding we found a registration for this person, we couldn't find anything for that person. And then the Democrats and Republicans alike, will vote on.
Well, sort of which one should be.
That's right, which one should be counted and which one should not.
Right. Now, and those are balanced, those are probably balanced groups. In other words, how many people are in that board?
Generally, well, we have to have at least one of each. But we generally have 2 and 2. For the presidential election, I think we had 4 and 4.
But I mean, so the point is that there's 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans.
Generally, I mean, we may at some point you may have 5 and 4. But as long as you have multiple numbers of each, we feel pretty comfortable.
Well, I know which brings me to another question. The people who work at the polling locations, they are divided amongst the parties as well. And I know in fact, they're supposed to be balanced.
The law says where we try to have an even number at every polling place, as practicably as possible. Now, the reality of the situation is in city precincts, it may be a little harder sometimes to find enough Republicans to where you have more than 1 or 2 in a polling place. Conversely, in county precincts, there are some precincts where it's going to be hard to find more than 1 or 2 Democrats. And this is kind of the nature of the beast, so to speak. But we have to have at least 1 in every polling place.
In fact, the reason I point that out is because I think that, for there to be, one of the things that I hear about from just kind of in the news is that there's a lot of voting irregularities. I've voted in a lot of different states, and I can tell you that
I don't know. The same election.
No, not the same election. I voted in a lot of states. No, not in the same election. Thank you. But the point is that in nowhere have I found it would be easy to be fraudulent. I mean, you would have to you would have to have the
Well, you'd have to have members of the other party be complicit in it.
Exactly. You have the complicity. And I will tell you that I've never been in a polling place in which the atmosphere isn't somber and serious and one in which you don't make jokes and you don't, you just don't do those things. I mean, I think our voting system is very, very free of that kind of irregularity.
We try and really impart on all of our workers that, because we need Democrats and Republicans by the law to be in a polling place, but we very much make them understand and share with them that when you're in there, it's all business.
It's all business.
If you want to talk, in downtime about your grandkids or sports or et cetera, that's fine. But we don't talk politics. We're there to do a job, and we're there to be fair. And you've seen. I'm sure you read a lot of stuff. You read the oath.
I did.
They swear to follow the Constitution of the United States, the state of Tennessee, and they take that seriously.
I actually did. I actually worked at a poll location here before you guys discovered who I was and kicked me off.
Well, it wasn't me, but okay.
No, I know. But anyway, yeah. I mean, and my point there is that it is a very somber. It's a serious place that is in which serious people do this work voluntarily, basically.
Yeah, I mean they get paid very. I think it's 135 for your workers and maybe 175 for your office or something like that. Yeah.
One thing we haven't touched on yet is the process of absentee ballots.
Okay.
And I know that Cliff is very. He's very aggressive, I think.
Very proactive.
Proactive is the right way to say it.
Yeah.
Proactive in getting people to apply for absentee ballots. Tell me why. Tell me what the absentee ballot situation is.
Essentially, anyone in Tennessee who is, and there are about 14 different ways that someone can, or conditions under which someone can apply to vote absentee, which basically means someone can apply to vote absentee and then have a ballot mailed to their place of residence and vote it and return it. And the primary reason is anybody who's age 60 or older, not 65, but it's 60 or older. The law was changed a couple of years ago. Anyone 60 years of age or older can request an absentee ballot, no questions asked. If someone's in the military, stationed somewhere else, if you're going to be out of the county all early voting on election day, if you are infirmed or disabled and or take care of someone like that, if you're a poll worker, if you're a candidate, if you're on jury duty, if you're an over-the-road truck driver, there's a number of there's 13 or 14 different reasons. But the bottom line is for us, we encourage people to vote absentee so they don't have to stand in lines, so they can fill out the ballot in the comfort and luxury of their own home. And is 90 days before any election, someone can request an absentee ballot and actually fill out what's called an application for absentee ballot. And then they will, starting the 45th day before an election, we'll start mailing those out, and they have until the close of polls on election day to get them back to us.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I know that for people who are no longer driving, not maintaining a driver's license, keeping it up, and you may not have then the approved ID, you don't have to have that to in a sense to vote.
As long as you've shown an ID at least once, whether it's in the registration process or something, then you can request an absentee ballot and not worry about that. And it's really big, particularly when we see on election day, we get a lot of calls from people who are, God love them, 80, 85, 90 years old. Now, I can't get to the polling place. Did you consider voting absentee? Because we encourage that.
That's right. Now, there's one other thing that I wanted to ask you about before I quit. There's something called a permanent absentee list, or whatever. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Okay. Who's on that, and how do you get on it?
Someone can be placed on a permanent absentee list if they have a doctor's statement or some other qualifying, if they're 60 years of age or older and they want to be put on the permanent absentee list. Now, the thing of it is, if they're on a permanent absentee list, you can go election to election. You can vote absentee this list. I don't think you're over 60, but if you were, you could vote absentee this election, but next election you can vote in person. If you're on a permanent list, you have to vote absentee every time, which means if you show up at a polling place, we're not going to let you vote.
Right, gotcha. Okay, but nevertheless, the point is that the process to vote, accessibility to vote is if you kind of pay attention, is pretty good.
And if people have questions, tell them to call us.
Sure,
absolutely.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, okay. So, Chris, I appreciate the time you spent with you today. In conclusion, could you summarize, maybe just in a couple of minutes, could you summarize some of the basic guidelines all registered voters need to follow to vote? I mean, they need to be registered. They need to have ID. Some of those
be registered. Have a photo ID. Be informed before you go to the polling place. Check your ballot out. It's going to be on our website. It's going to be in the newspaper. And I plead with everybody, early vote, because you can vote anywhere in early voting. And on election day, you have to vote in your precinct. And so that's as simple as that, really.
All right. I would say to the audience tonight, thank you for watching. And if you didn't vote in the past election, it's time for you to determine if you are registered to vote in Knox County. It's a good time to register to vote. We're on the air next week, same time, same place. See you then. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep. All right. This is good. This is good.
Is that okay?
Yeah, this is great.
All right.
Now, see what I
talked fast because I knew we had a lot to go through. So.
You're real good at this. So here's the point. Here's why it makes sense to have you and not somebody else. It's outside is that you know the detail of everything we're talking about.
I hope so.
You do, yeah.
I hope so. Yeah.
Are you an attorney?
No.
No.
No, but I'm married to one.